Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to my channel. First I'm gonna do a little skin stuff, and then we're doing some chapters. So, Kyla, this isn't for you tonight. Keep scrolling. I think, depending on how much... Oh, I'm running out of toner. Depending on how long each chapter is, we might do 2 tonight. So, shout out to Dana. I'm doing this video tonight because of her. Because I've been slacking and she needs to know what happens in the book. I know, I've been slacking. But I might make 3 videos in 1 week. Like, also, why am I beating my face up? Like, damn. Okay, toner on. Okay. Night cream. Put some niacinamide serum on there. I'm not putting my acne medicine on tonight because it's just doing too much to my skin. I don't know. I'm not loving whatever it's doing. I'm not a fan. Good molecules. Go. I know my skin is horrible, my goodness. My face hurts too much. It hurts. Like, you think I like living like this? Sorry, you can't even see what I'm doing. I've been using this, the CeraVe Facial Moisturizing Cream, or lotion. Sorry, there's a difference between lotion and cream. It kind of burns on my, like, acne spots, and I feel like it's not very moisturizing. It's supposed to be sitting on my skin overnight and soaking it up, and I don't feel like it is. I feel like the skin's drier. So honestly, and it's not a lot, and it's for a good price. So, and by good price, I mean it's, like, pretty pricey for CeraVe and a small thing. But I'm gonna use it up and then get something new. So I give it a 2 out of 10 because I feel like it's not doing what it needs to do, and if anything, it hurts and kind of pricey. So do with that what you will. My glue stick. Go. Yeah, shake it to the max. Shake it to the max. Shake it to the max. Like, look at how red. I also want to change my piercing so much. I wish I knew how to get it back in. Shake it to the max. Okay. Oh, painted my toenails, like, really horribly. And it's like, I'm pretty sure it's like getting stuck to the carpet and all the, like, gross little things in my carpet. Okay. Hello, my lovelies. Hello. Shake it to the max. Shake it to the max. Shake it to the max. I've also, I can't even show you a song because it's on my phone. I record on my phone. But, okay. I suggest catching up if you're not sure what's going on, and I also suggest catching up if you don't remember, because I don't remember. Okay. We're on chapter 11! I forgot that we're finally at double digits. Okay. Something was going on out there. Also, I don't know how close you guys want me to get to this. My video, it's of me looking crazy. Sorry. Okay. Julian stood in the low-lit kitchen, drumming his fingers on the island, the sound weaving together with the tick of the clock to create a pattern of sorts. Even by his own punctual standards, he'd gotten dressed too early for the wind-down Napa event this evening. Anything to avoid the blinking cursor on his computer screen, and memories of a certain energetic gardener gasping for air against his mouth. Jesus. He couldn't get the fucking taste out of his head. It stayed with him day, night, and every second in between. Turned out he'd almost kissed her once before, 15 years ago. That night he'd drunk too much out of pure irritation with his sister. Vodka and anxiety had blurred the details of the evening, but ever since the memory resurfaced, details were returning, vivid ones that made him question how he could have ever forgotten in the first place, even after checking out for a brief window of time afterward. Now? Julian remembered the fading light on her hair and the overwhelming urge to kiss her, the smooth skin of her back, and the realization that she was a freshman, after which Julian was fairly certain he'd hustled her back to the party with his face on fire. How did he misplace a memory that had the power to rock him now? Julian didn't know, but it appeared that Hallie was determined to turn up once every decade and put cracks in his concentration. He couldn't fit his regular thoughts in between the ones of her moaning, thighs shaking with her orgasm, and what happened afterward. What had happened afterward? Hold on, I want to get my drink. Brief interlude. Should I get my girl in here too? Let's get my girl. The straw is nasty, and I'm almost out of drink. My girl. I'll put her here. Front and center. Okay. What had happened afterward? Still unclear. He'd been thrown the hell off. He knew that much. Normally, with a woman, there was an orderly physical progression from kissing to more. With Hallie, he'd operate on blind instinct, his body in total control, not his mind. Yeah, he'd been off kilter when the fever cooled, trying to put his head back together. By the time he succeeded, she was halfway to the door. Which was for the best, right? He'd been trying to convince himself of that for 2 days. Obviously, she was a danger to his control he relied upon so he wouldn't aggravate his anxiety. With Hallie, he'd lost any sense of self-preservation and got lost. With her breath on his mouth and her green thumb scent infiltrating his brain, he'd move without conscious thought. If he wanted to keep touching her, if he wanted release, he had no choice. But coming down had been like crashing into a wall. His mind wasn't supposed to go offline like that. His impulses were meant to be subdued? What does this man think he is? Subdued, like... Okay, because you got such crazy ideas and sexual, like, needs. Like, Julian, you were the most boring, square man. Funny, he never thought of them that way. Julian jerked his chin to the side, setting loose a series of cracks in his neck, tension that continued to build with the passage of time since Hallie's hasty departure. Now Saturday night had arrived, and his mood was not the kind that he should be unleashing on the general population, especially when representing Voss Vineyards. But what choice did he have? Voss Vineyards? Voss Vineyards. But what choice did he have? At least he could get away from the blank page taunting him in the office for a few hours. Natalie trudged into the kitchen in stoic silence, dressed in all black, oversized mirror sunglasses hiding her eyes. One might think they were on their way to a funeral, instead of an outdoor wine event on a fine summer evening in Napa. And Natalie could easily be the grieving widow, considering she'd only gotten out of bed for the day an hour earlier. What was going on with his sister? Despite a rebellious phase in her youth, Natalie had turned into a grade A overachiever once she had gotten out of her system. Once, after not hearing from her for a while, he checked her Facebook page and found she posted a Forbes article in which she had been touted as a rising star in the world of investing. Add in her missing engagement ring and things had obviously taken a turn, but the Voss family operated on a need-to-know basis. They didn't exactly shoot the shit. Information was given out as needed, and more often than not, kept to oneself. Why was that? Growing up, he'd more or less assumed that sucking it up and handling a crisis alone, so as not to disappoint or inconvenience anyone, was normal. In college, he'd been shocked by his roommate's semi-weekly phone call to his parents, during which he told them every piece of information under the sun, from his cafeteria meals to the girls he dated. Then, as a history professor, he'd witnessed the close relationships his students had with their parents as well. On family weekend at Stanford, they showed up in droves wearing red sweatshirts and bearing care packages. They gave a shit? Perhaps not every family was close, sharing trials and triumphs as a matter of course. But based on the real-world data he'd witnessed with his very own eyes, this guy. Families that cared about one another were more commonplace and healthier than his. You didn't realize that? Sad, but also... Really? You're grown. I would tell her you're glad she's here with you, but before you say it, make sure you mean it. She'll be able to tell the difference. He cut Natalie a speculative glance, hearing Hallie's words in his head, far from the first time today. In fact, since he'd left Thursday night, braving a storm to get away from him, he'd been hearing the gardener's voice in his fucking sleep. Natalie removed a flask from her purse, unscrewed the cap lazily, and tipped it to her lips. After a second gulp, she offered him the metal container. No, thank you, he said automatically. Why, though? Didn't he want a belt of whatever was in that flask? Yes, obviously. He hadn't slept since Thursday night due to his brain's insistence on replaying every second of his interaction with Hallie on a torturous loop. Actually, yes, I'll have some. Natalie's eyebrows shot up behind her sunglasses, but she passed him the flask without comment. Rough going on the book, big brother? He studied the opening of the container for a moment, trying not to make a mental list of all the reasons he shouldn't imbibe hard liquor at 5 o'clock. For one, he'd have to interact with the public on behalf of the family business, which might be in more trouble than anyone realized. And two, he desperately needed to get back to his book at some point. But if he had a drink this early, he would almost certainly have two, which would lead to lethargic thoughts tomorrow. Hallie running away from him into the rain, feelings hurt. The hell with it, he muttered, tilting the flask to nearly a 90-degree angle, letting the river of whiskey warm a path down his throat and hit his empty stomach like a boulder. I can already tell that was a terrible decision, he said, handing the whiskey back to Natalie. She took another rip of the drink, then stuffed it back into her purse. Evidently I'm rounding off on you. Normally he would let that cryptic statement go without comment. Letting someone's bad mood go unaddressed was the standard. None of his business. Only, it was. Wasn't it? Why do you say that? Have you made any bad decisions lately? What? Natalie did a double take. Why are you asking me that? Apparently communing with one's family was harder than the thought. Is he a robot? Is this man an actual robot? Like, what? Why is my family having feelings? Why must I ask to get answers? Why should I care about my sister? Like, okay. For one, you slept until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now you're dressed like you're going to deliver a eulogy instead of shaking hands at something called Wine Down Napa. Maybe I'm eulogizing the grapes. Do you know how many of them had to die so people from Oklahoma can pretend they're getting an oaky aftertaste? She would get along great with Hallie. That thought came out of nowhere and stuck like an arrow in his jugular. Well, he might as well let that possibility go right now. Natalie and Hallie would probably never spend time together unless one of these days Natalie actually went outside and introduced herself in the yard. After all, Hallie probably never wanted to see him again, and rightly so. How could one woman draw him in so intensely while throwing him so far outside his comfort zone? He rubbed at the throb in the center of his forehead. I just wish you would tell me what has brought you back to St. Helena, Natalie. You go first. Julian frowned. I'm writing a book? I'm writing a book? She mimicked. If all you wanted was to write a book, you could have done that back at Stanford, her fingers fiddling with the air. Subtract 2 hours of gym time per week, eat your meals 5 minutes faster, there's your writing time. You didn't have to come to Napa to write Wexler's Ventures. He blinked. Shifted against the island. How did you know my hero's name is Wexler? Have you been reading my manuscript? Have you been touching my drum set? Did her color deepen? I might have skimmed a page or two. She looked like she was considering reaching for her flask again. Instead, she threw out a frustrated hand. How long are you going to leave him dangling over that stupid cliff? You seem oddly invested, he sputtered, kind of touched that his sister seemed concerned about old Wexler. Finally, they're having a normal sibling conversation. I'm not, she said, waving him off. Just like he has a grappling hook attached to his belt, in case you forgot. He'd totally forgotten. I didn't. No, of course not, she sighed, pursing her lips. Then why did you make him blonde? His expression must have betrayed his utter puzzlement because she elaborated. Blonde men are unrelatable. That's true. I hate when characters are blonde. Sorry, Dana. But it's like every single book character, there's a sexy, like, athletic built blonde guy with blue eyes. And then there's this skinny with big boobs and curves for days that she's just so embarrassed of because no other girls her size have curves with um, almost white like platinum blonde hair and violet eyes. Like, every time. Who are these people we're describing? A laugh came very close to sneaking out of him. That was happening more and more frequently lately, wasn't it? He couldn't remember his chest ever having felt this loose. But then, why around Hallie did it get so tight again? That sounds like theory, not fact. Nope, it's fact. Have you ever stood there talking to a man with white blonde hair and not speculated on his lifestyle? You can't not do it. It's impossible. You don't hear a single word coming out of his mouth. So you're saying I should make Wexler a brunette? Obviously, yes. Look, blonde men say things like hot tubbing, and they go hiking in Yosemite with the cool girl. I want to root for a guy who's unlikely to go on an adventure. Sure, she gave him a weary look. Like you. Julia made a sound. I'll take the hair color change under advisement. Great. She waited a beat. So, you were just going to own the unadventurous label? No arguments there, he said briskly, nudging the brass mallard on the kitchen island. The brass mallard? Why do you have a brass duck on your kitchen island? Unless you count having a secret admirer as adventurous. What? Natalie slapped a hand down on the marble. No way. What? You are lying. Nope, they've been sitting right here. Maybe if I'd kept them in the wine refrigerator, you'd have found them. He grinned at her middle finger. At first I thought you wrote it as a prank, but there's sex stuff in them? No, nothing like that. Lines from the second letter drifted through his head. They're just more personal than one would get when pulling a prank, I suppose. She raked both hands down her face, dragging the skin beneath her eyes further than seemed wise. I don't really know how you do that. Oh my god, I need to know everything. There's nothing important to share. Saying that made his stomach sour. Why did he have such a loyalty to this unknown person? Perhaps because although he knew Hallie hadn't written those letters, some part of him had secretly wished he had. Okay. Out of sheer masochism, he'd imagined her penning those words on the pages, and he'd sort of gotten stuck picturing her as the admirer, which was nothing short of ridiculous and yet another way for the gardener to occupy his brain day and night. I'm not going to write back. Fuck that! Yes, you are, Julian! She clasped her hands together beneath her chin. Please let me help you. I'm so bored. No. He shook his head, the bitterness in his stomach turning even more acidic. I'm here to work. I don't have time for some sort of ridiculous pen pal. Yeah, okay, King. That's all you can think about. Natalie's shoulders slumped. I officially hate your guts. Guilt trickled in slowly. Why was he denying his sister something that might serve as a distraction from whatever was causing her to drink too much and hibernate in her dark bedroom? Anyway, maybe he should write back to the admirer, if for no other reason than to satisfy his curiosity. Obviously, at some point he would have to put the gardener out of his mind. He could either do it now or when he inevitably returned to Stanford. If he could stop picturing Hallie when he read those words, moving on eventually would be a lot easier. Still didn't feel right, no matter which way he sliced it. Damn, she'd gotten to him. Although writing the return letter didn't necessarily mean he had to send it, but having a mutual project might create an opening for Natalie to confide in him. He wanted that, didn't he? All right, since we have some time to kill before we leave, you can help me with writing a response, he said grudgingly, already regretting the decision, at least until his sister started fist-pumping her way around the kitchen, more animated than he'd seen her since she'd come home. 45 minutes later, Julian and Natalie trudged up the path to the main house. Natalie walked to his right, freshly written letter in hand, rows of grapes extending out past her like outstretched arms into the evening. Light from his mother's window beckoned ahead, crickets chirped in the near distance, and the elusive vineyard smell hung in the air. Kind of like a 3-day-old floral arrangement. He'd forgotten how familiar it could be. Where are we supposed to leave the letter again? Julian bit back a sigh and pointed at the tree stump about 20 yards away, shaking his head when Natalie skipped toward it gleefully. He didn't have the heart to tell her he would come out later tonight and take it back, nor could he regret the time they'd spent together writing the response. Such a simple activity had loosened something between him and his sister. Enough for him to pry? You mentioned that you're bored in St. Helena, he said slowly. So why aren't you back in New York, Natalie? She finished tucking the letter in the stump and turned, rolled her eyes. I know I'm intruding on your solitude. No, I'm glad you're here with me, her step faltered, as they started up the path again, side by side. And Julian must have meant what he said about being glad, because she didn't call him a liar. In that moment, he had the most pressing urge to tell Hallie what was happening, to call her right in the middle of it, although she probably wouldn't even answer. I guess you could say that I'm worried. He tacked on around the goose egg in his throat. About you, that's all. Several seconds ticked past before she laughed, turned, and carried up on the path. You're worried about me? You haven't called me in a year. Damn. His stomach sank. Has it really been that long? Give or take. Well, following her, he clasped his hands behind his back, unclasped them. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let so much time pass. He felt her considering him from the corner of her eye. I guess it's not that hard to understand why. After everything that happened, he avoided looking at the vineyard. Do we have to talk about the fire? Do we have to talk about the fact that you were a total hero and saved my life? She let out an exasperated laugh. No, I guess not. I guess we can ignore the fact that you were incredible that night, but our father only saw what happened afterward. He had no right to judge you like that, Julian. To call you unfit to be involved with your family vineyard. He was wrong. Julian couldn't unclench his jaw to respond. He could only see images from that night. The nighttime sky lit up like something from the apocalypse, putting the people he loved in danger. People he was supposed to protect. Needles digging into his chest, his fingers curling into his palms, and remaining that way. Stuck. Everyone watching him come apart. That slow slide into nothingness afterward that he couldn't break free from, no matter how much he commanded himself to focus, to pull it together. No. Instead, he'd gone dark. Left everyone else to sort out the mess while he navigated his mental fallout. It's my fault, Natalie said quietly. That broke Julian out of his haze of discomfort, his attention whipping to the right. What are you talking about? Even in the muted light, he could see the red staining her face. If you didn't have to save me, if I didn't put you through that, you wouldn't have lost it in front of him. I shouldn't even have gone into the shed. The fire was moving too fast. Natalie, don't be ridiculous. Realizing how harsh he sounded, he softened his tone. You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing is your fault. She made a sound, kept her face averted. Could have fooled me. I mean, we weren't exactly the Tanner family to begin with, but we've barely spoken at all since then. I take responsibility for that. I should have been better about being in your life. Obviously needed some... Natalie stopped walking abruptly, a glint in her eye that he could only interpret as dangerous. Some what? Guidance? Advice? I'm going to go with support. A few degrees of tension left his sister, but her expression remained suspicious. She opened her mouth and closed it again, turned in a circle and looked out at the vineyard. Okay, since you're so deeply concerned, Julian. The corners of her mouth turned down. I made a play on an investment and it tanked. Hard. Like, her tone turned choppy. $1 billion hard. I was forced really, to step down to the firm, and my ex-fiance, broke our engagement to save face. Fuck that dude. A lump moved up and down in her throat. Morrison Talbert III was too humiliated to be associated with me, and of course, since I'm no longer being paid, I was the one who moved out of the apartment. She splayed her hands. So, here I am, half drunk, talking shit about blonde men, writing love letters with my brother. Wow, that really doesn't sound too good out loud. Julian couldn't hide his shock. She'd just been quietly living with this baggage since arriving in St. Helena? He didn't have a clue where to begin. What? Comforting her? He really should have clarified his goal before he started to question her. Your ex-fiance's name is Morrison Talbert III, and you're calling blonde men unrelatable? He's got her there. Natalie stared at him blankly for long moments, but it only took Julian half of one of those moments to know he was not good at this. No. At least until his sister burst into laughter, the loud kind that rang out across the vineyard and loosened the elusive something inside of him a little more. He started to think, maybe he would join her in laughing, but a voice sliced abruptly through the evening and cut off the sound. I had a feeling you weren't just home on for a visit, his mother said, coming down the porch steps for the main house. Her features were backlit by the flickering lanterns hanging on either side of the front door and mostly hidden, but Julian swore a flash of hurt crossed his mother's face before she replaced it with a mask of indifference. Well, she ran a hand along the loop of her silk scarf. How long were you planning to wait before asking for money? Damn, Mama. Damn. I'm so sorry to hear that. How are you doing? Fuck that man. His sister's spine snapped straight. Julian waited for her to issue a denial, to say that she wouldn't be asking for money, if for no other reason than pride. But she didn't. In the end, she looked like their mother, squared in the eye, and took a king-size pull from her flask. Lovely, muttered Corinne. It wasn't lost on Julian that they were standing in the same spot, or close to anyway, where the Voss family had been informed the fire was moving faster than originally predicted. Of course, they were minus one member. His father was in Europe facing Formula One cars. But they were here. They had problems to solve. Was he going to let an absent presence dictate how and when that was done? No. Julian didn't think he would. What if 4 years of silence yielded, except for the three of them suffering alone, stubbornly refusing to turn to one another for support or solutions? Corinne, he coughed into his fist. Mother. Natalie isn't the only one who's been hiding something. What are you talking about? Corinne snapped quickly, too quickly. When he noticed the layer of panic in her eyes, he softened his tone. The vineyard? We haven't quite made it back after the fire. Sales are down, competition's fierce, and we can't afford to implement the changes that will make us viable again. Natalie dropped the flask to her hip. The vineyard isn't doing well? We are doing fine, Corinne stressed, letting out a forced laugh. Your brother was probably speaking to Manuel. Our manager is a worrier, always has been. Our equipment is malfunctioning and outdated. I've seen with my own eyes. The public relations team is on a permanent leave. We're behind on production. I'm doing the best I can, Corinne hissed. You think it was easy to be handed a burned-out vineyard along with divorce papers? It wasn't. I'm sorry it's not up to your standards, Julian. He started to argue that he wasn't blaming anyone, let alone her, but his mother wasn't finished. Do you know I have to attend a luncheon next week in his honor? It's the 20th anniversary of the Napa Valley Association of Vintners. Vintners? Being formed, which I'll admit that has done a lot of good in the region. He might be their founding father, but he's not even here. This place is falling into disrepair. She's just so cute. And yet, they want to celebrate the glory days. Your father trailblazed a path to them lining their pockets. They don't care that he abandoned this place and his family. He's still their hero, and you're the one that kept the doors open despite it all. I'm not blaming you for the decline, because I wouldn't do that. I'm just asking. What are you asking? In the back of his mind, he could hear his father's voice echoing through the vines. You've always been a fucking head case, haven't you? Jesus Christ, look at you. Pull yourself together. Stick to teaching and just stay away from what I built, alright? Stay away from the vineyard. Whether his father's assessments were true or not, he wasn't leaving his family to carry their burdens alone anymore. His father was gone. Julian was there. He could do something. I'm asking to help, Mother. I know I'm not necessarily welcome. Not welcome, Corinne shook her head. You're my son. His throat muscles felt stiff. I'm referring to what happened, and I understand if my input makes you uncomfortable, but frankly, that's too bad. You're getting it anyway. Corinne made a small sound, burying her face in her hands a moment. Just when Julian assumed she was working up the courage to ask him to remain detached from the business, she came forward with open arms and embraced him. For several seconds, he could only stare dumbfounded at his sister before she, too, came forward and wrapped her arms around him, both him and Corinne. I did not have this on today's bingo card, Natalie stiffened. I'm sorry, to both of you. Apparently having reached her capacity for emotional displays, Corinne shifted free of the group hug. It has been a long 4 years. I never want either of you to feel unwelcome in your own home. You might have noticed I have a hard time admitting I need help, or even company. Well, you've got it now, Natalie crowed, hoisting her flask. I'm never leaving. Let's not get carried away, Corinne said, smoothing the sleeve of her dress. Julian needed more time to process the revelations of the last 5 minutes. For now, he needed distraction from the... Why can't I speak? Jesus. For now, he needed distraction from the growing notch in his sternum. Remembering the small box stuffed into his jacket pocket, Julian removed the object, holding it out to Corinne. This is only a small start, but I thought we could hand these out tonight at our table. Corinne shied away from the white box like it might contain a garter snake. What is it? Business cards for court on Grapevine Way. The two women stared at him in an expectant silence. There's a new wine shop next door giving the owner Lorna some competition. I thought we could send some business her way. In the process, we're giving people an incentive to buy our wine. Here, look. He flipped open the top. It's a small discounted Voss wine. Voss wine. Nothing major, but it's the first step towards selling the stock currently on shelves and making way for the new vintage. Wholesale orders will remain low until we clear what's already there, and there's a lot. Let's get the money we need to make this place whole again. It won't be restored overnight, but we have the framework, and that's half the battle. His mother and sister traded an eyebrow raise. What brought this on? Asked Corinne, while examining a business card. Have you secretly been wanting to help all this time? Hallie, making her happy. Obviously, I don't have a stake in the situation. I just breathe easier when there is less of a chance our gardener crying. Thought it could look good for the vineyard. You know, one local business helping another. Though visibly skeptical, Corinne finally took the box and removed the top, sighing at what she revealed. Well, at least they're not tacky. Thank you, said Julian briskly. Wait, did you design business cards for a local retail shop? He nodded, prompting his sister to continue. And you're getting secret admirer letters? Natalie looked down at the metal container in her hand. I need to get out more. You are looking quite pale, his mother commented. Natalie turned and let out a strangled scream over the rows of grapes. Yes, things certainly wouldn't change overnight, with them or the vineyard, but hell, if they weren't at least pointed in the right direction now. We should go, Julian said, heading for the courtyard and driveway of the main house. Wouldn't want to be late to wind down. You don't have to say it like that, his mother complained in a withering tone, sarcastically. He's not, Natalie interjected. The name itself is doing all the sarcasm heavy lifting. Do I have a minute to run inside and pee? Julian and Corinne groaned. Shut up, Natalie called over her shoulder, trotting back towards the house. Despite his exasperation, the night didn't feel like a total chore anymore. If he'd spent tonight working, he would have missed the revelation from his sister, or these awkward family moments with Corinne that were semi-painful, but also them. For so long he'd been focused on making every minute productive, but perhaps his definition of productive was beginning to shift. Oh, look at it. He's probably trying to figure it out. Let's see. For a short book, and like a not that crazy story, chapter's kind of long. The people that read full-on books, they have to like do it in a million shots. I feel like my throat is shot. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Okay. Hallie loved crowds. Chapter 12. Hallie loved crowds. Being able to hear everyone speaking at once but not make out a single word. The fact that all these people had dressed up and driven to the same location all at once for a special purpose. Crowds were a celebration of movement and color and trying new things. For the second year in a row, she agreed to help Lavinia and Jerome behind the counter at Wine Down Napa. Convincing the festival committee to agree to allow a donut shop to display at the event had taken some fancy footwork, but the gooey baked goods were a huge hit the year prior, leading to a lot of stuffy connoisseurs walking around the massive tent with chocolate wings extending out from the corners of their mouths. Looking around the corner and the buzzing aisles of vendors, Hallie was pleased to see an even more eclectic mix this year. Most of the displays were for local vineyards, and they were elaborate, tasteful. Wine Down Napa didn't have the feeling of a typical indoor market. In true Napa style, the booths were constructed of polished wood. There was a step and repeat behind each one splashed with the vineyard logos. Romantic lighting had been angled throughout the tent to create a dreamlike atmosphere. Fairy lights twinkling on the ceiling, turning wine glasses into enchanted goblets. But in addition to Fudge Judy breaching the boundaries of wine world, there was an exhibit for gourmet dog treats and another for CBD gummies. They'd cast a wide net. Ticket holders were beginning to arrive, journalists in press badges snapping pictures of people enjoying their first glasses of wine, angling the shots to capture the sprawling courtyard of the Meadowood Hotel in the background. The air was sultry. Orchestra music drifted down the mountain and through the tent on a light June breeze. And she couldn't help but remember her grandmother roaming the aisles slowly last year, saying hello to old friends and new, accepting pamphlets for vineyard tours to be polite. Lavinia came up beside Hallie and gave her a gentle hip bump. After weeks of designing the new ultra-refined Merlot Cruller... After weeks of designing the new ultra-refined Merlot Cruller? I don't know. I'm assuming it's a dessert. The Lucky Charms donut holes will probably be our biggest seller. Not even wine snobs can resist an artificially flavored marshmallow. Okay. Hallie dropped her head to Lavinia's shoulder. Especially when the CBD kicks in and they relax. Hopefully not enough to mistake the dog biscuits for donuts. Oh, I don't know. Could be entertaining. They laughed, watching more and more people arrive in the tents. Various levels of VIP access. VIP access? Okay. Snobs. Like, it sounds like this is, like, just a small little, like, I don't know. In my head, I just envision, like, in, like, a country club, this room, an event or, like, meeting room. And they just have, like, a bunch of tables, like you would at, like, a college fair. I don't know. That's how I envision it. And they're just fancy tables. And it's just, like, lit up pretty. So, Lavinia prompted, we were in such a mad rush to get set up, I haven't had a chance to ask. What is the latest with our illustrious professor? Hallie blew out of breath, her gaze drifting over to the Voss Vineyard booth. No one had arrived yet, though they'd most likely taped their in-house sommelier to represent them tonight. And even if Corinne Voss made an appearance, Julian definitely wouldn't be there. She'd assured herself of that for the last 2 days and still couldn't prevent the low sink of disappointment in her belly. She adjusted her fudge Judy apron, heat creeping up the sides of her face. The ladies isn't really up for discussion, not in polite company. Lavinia reared back with raised eyebrows. Good thing I'm not polite. Hallie threw a pointed look at Jerome. Later. Oh, come on, we both know I'm going to tell him anyway. Good to know. They stopped to smile at 2 guests who wandered past looking down their noses at the donuts. They would definitely come crawling back for a few glasses of wine, though. There might have been some further intimacy, not the whole enchilada, more like, I don't know, jalapeno poppers. You were speaking to a British woman in Mexican food terminology? Does not translate. British people never had Mexican food? Okay, losers. Sorry, it's just that, honestly, I'm not really sure what happened in Julian's kitchen. She only knew her entire body started to tingle thinking about it. His breath on her neck, their mouths interlocked and panting. Or if it was a normal thing to do? Lavinia was agog. Fuck off! I don't know why that one really made me see her as British. Fuck off! He tried anal! No! Her cheeks were not hot enough now to be fresh from the oven. Not that! Oh, thank God. Lavinia briefly doubled over. I was gonna need a cigarette for this. It was more like... Hallie looked around to make sure nobody was within earshot, then dropped her voice to a whisper. The internet calls it mutual masturbation. Bloody hell, do I need that cigarette? Lavinia stared at her for a beat. What? I know. Jerome approached his wife from behind, his default suspicious expression in full swing. What's going on here? I'll tell you later, Lavinia said quickly. But in brief, it involves wanking. Without missing a beat, Jerome turned and moseyed to the other side of the booth. Lavinia shrugged defensively in the face of Hallie's sputtering shock. I had to get rid of him so I can hear the rest, didn't I? Hallie slumped. There is no rest of it. This time I'm really, really sure it was the last occasion we do something both confusing and... She tried to swallow, but her mouth was too dry, thanks to the sensual memories bombarding her. The way he ground his hardness there, the movements of his hands speeding up, his grunt of her name. Arousing together? Yes, Lavinia said, peering at her thoughtfully. I can see you're definitely capable of saying no. Your nips aren't hard or anything. What? Hallie looked down and saw the apron was definitely low enough to make out the outline of her nipples, and they were indeed bullet-shaped. Had they been anything but puckered and uncomfortable for the last 2 days? With a hasty yank, she tugged up the neck of the apron to cover up the evidence. No, really, she hesitated a moment, then blurted. I wrote him a second secret admirer letter. Sober, this time. Lavinia rocked back on her heels. No, you didn't. Lavinia, note my track record of complicating things. You know I did. She bit her lip. And they were right there, in plain view in his Food Network-worthy kitchen. He quoted them at me, and I couldn't bring myself to tell him I'm the author. Her breast uncrossed herself. Only God can save you now, Hallie Welch. That's a little dramatic. Nervous energy snapped in her veins. Right? What's a little dramatic? They both turned to find Owen standing at the front of the booth. At first, Hallie wondered if maybe the man was an evil twin or a doppelganger, since she'd only ever seen Owen in jeans and a t-shirt, or shorts and gardening shoes. But tonight he wore a pressed slacks and a tucked-in polo shirt, hair styled. And was that cologne? Owen, darling. Lavinia recovered from the interruption first, leaning across the table to kiss Owen on both cheeks. You look fabulous. Thanks. Rather adorably, he scrubbed at the back of his neck. Same to you. His attention drifted to Hallie and stuck. You look great tonight too, Hallie. Really great. She looked down her outfit of choice, most of which was covered by the apron. Probably a good thing considering she found it impossible to settle on an ensemble, so she ended up with a low-cut floral shirt tucked into a plaid high-waisted skirt. At least her hair was in order tonight, curls tamed and loose around her shoulders. Thanks, Owen. So everybody's going after the girl that can't dress? Like she's dressed in the dark, or... like, what's going on? Oh, where was I? Oh, yeah. Terrible outfit. At least her hair was in order tonight. Curls tamed and loose around her shoulders. Thanks, Owen. Her words cut themselves off because when she glanced up from her schizophrenic get-up, Okay? Don't really love that. There he was, directly over Owen's shoulder. Julian Voss had entered the tent. Oh, tent. Still feel like my vision of it is just not that fancy. It was shocking to find out that she'd almost slightly gotten used to his presence, but only when it was just the two of them. In public, like this, he was a Van Gogh in a gallery of children's finger paintings. He was quite simply incomparable. Tall and intense and handsome and attention-grabbing, kind of impatient-looking on top of it all. Every head turned at his arrival as if they'd sensed a shift in atmospheric balance. I highly doubt everyone's head turned because Julian Voss walked in the door. He wore a starched white shirt. How can you tell a shirt is starched? I genuinely want to know, how, just by looking at it, can she know the shirt was starched? Is it the texture? Is it the color? I don't know. I just feel like, how would you know that? He wore a starched white shirt totally devoid of wrinkles and navy blue slacks, a burgundy tie, cufflinks. He looked like the type of man who would wear those old-fashioned sock garters below the knee. Okay, that's kind of funny. And she touched herself in front of him. He'd done the same. They'd been completely weak in front of each other, while the storm rampaged outside. And seeing him now, so composed and in charge, made the whole thing feel like a dream. Bet you'd have done anal, Lavinia said out of the corner of her mouth. Bet you done anal. Thankfully, Jerome and Owen were engaged in a conversation about golf and didn't overhear. Could you please never bring that up again, Hallie implored. He'll be the one bringing it up, if you catch my meaning. Oh, don't worry, I do. You're as subtle as a chainsaw. Hallie ordered herself to stop staring at Julian, who was now crossing the tent with his mother and sister. And she failed. Everyone in the tent did. Voss Vineyard might be in need of an upgrade, but the first family of St. Helena moved like royalty and looked the part, too. Meanwhile, here she stood in the mix of patterns, talking about butt sex. She wouldn't change a thing, but the contrast only brought it home how utterly unlike they were. None of that seemed to matter when Julian glanced over sharply, slowing to a stop when he saw her behind the fudge Judy counter. Oh my God, her heart was going to beat right out of her body. It was magic, having this gallant, thoughtful man notice her from across a crowded room and stop dead in the middle of it all. Those times she'd opened up to him about her grief and one-third life crisis. She'd felt so utterly safe sharing with him. Did she imagine that bond? No, she couldn't have. In addition to the magic of being pinned by those whiskey eyes across the tent, was now lust. The urgent, frustrating kind she'd never experienced with anyone else. The kind she only half understood while mooning at him on YouTube before his return to St. Helena. Beneath those lusty layers, though, was the wistfulness of regret. Every time they connected, the disconnect between their personalities became a little more obvious. And what could be done about that? Hallie? Owen laid a hand on her arm, and she caught the barest change in Julian's expression. It clouded over, a groove fashioning itself between his eyebrows. A muscle had begun to tick in his jaw when she finally managed to wrestle her attention away from Julian and focus on Owen, who apparently had been addressing her to no avail for quite some time. I'm sorry, all this excitement, her laugh sounded strained. I think I have wine envy. Owen quickly set down the donut he picked up with a provided pair of silver tongs. I'll get you a glass. What are you in the mood for? He's so sweet. I hope he doesn't wind up being like a dick or something. Also, Owen's too boring for you, but Julian's not. She could not let this man run around fetching her a drink when she was remembering how Julian's abdomen felt flexing against her. No, that's really okay, Owen. He was already half off like a shot. Hallie traded a guilty look with Lavinia, but they didn't have time to talk. The tent was quickly filling up and people wanted donuts, mainly because, unlike last year, a lot of guests seemed to have brought their children. In the past, no one under the age of 21 had been admitted to wine tasting events in Napa. But since the fire that damaged so much of the region followed by the economic wrecking ball of the pandemic, St. Helena had slowly adopted more of a family-friendly image in the hopes of appealing to new visitors. Apparently, kids were the newest caveat. And in the case of Wine Down, the pitfalls of that decision quickly became obvious. Children ran figure eights around the older clientele, their mothers receiving more than their fair share of judgment. The host of the event might have allowed children, but being that beverage of choice is alcohol, it was nothing for the youngsters to drink or eat, except for the donuts. That's how Hallie became the official babysitter of Wine Down Napa. It started off with a single offer to watch the toddler and overstressed mother while she went off and indulged in a glass of wine. Then a second family approached, inquiring about the professional childcare services, to which Hallie saluted them with her wine glass, and they left their child anyway. Although Lavinia needed Hallie's an extra set of hands, the parents were buying donuts in gratitude, so they took the trade off and booted Hallie in favor of the extra sales. Half an hour later, she had a football team of kids under the age of 8 playing Red Rover on the field outside the tent and chomping on chocolate crullers. She actually lost track of time which one had eaten what. Wait, what? She actually lost track of which one had eaten what, or how many. Now, that out of everything turned out to be the biggest mistake. Hopped up on an obscene amount of sugar, the kids decided they were thirsty. "I want water!" announced one of the dinosaur-obsessed twins while picking a wedgie. What was his name? Shiloh? Okay, Hallie said, looking back towards the tent. There had to be water in there somewhere, right? Everyone hold hands and let's go inside quietly and check. "Mom!" Shiloh screamed, running towards the tent, barreling through the flap, followed by the rest of the children, all shouting for their mothers. "Wait, guys, wait!" Hallie hurried after them with 2 empty donut boxes under her arms. Whoa, empty? But it was too late to prevent what happened next. She entered the tent just in time to watch the sugar-hyped kids flying around like pinballs. She really doesn't think. But then again, these adults left their children with her and had no wherewithal to be like, some rules, but okay. The wine glasses sloshed in the hands of VIP guests, and in 2 cases tables were bumped, glass shattering, the hum of conversation grinding to a halt. Hallie stood just inside the entrance in a sort of trance, her gaze moving unerringly to Julian, who stood on the other side of the flabbergasted crowd, a glass of wine poised halfway to his mouth. She could practically hear his thoughts out loud. They were so plain on his face. Here was Hallie once again proving herself a purveyor of chaos, barely fit to be among adults, and patently incapable of managing children. Destruction in the flesh, now available for parties. Julian lowered his glass, set it down, and just managed to steady a row of wine flutes on the Voss Vineyard display before they were knocked over. Hallie winced and began chasing the wayward children. She was quickly joined by Owen, who gave her a sympathetic smile, which is a lot more comforting than Julian's steely-eyed judgment. Like most times, she was faced with an unpleasant truth about herself. She dodged it. But what else could that look in Julian's eyes mean except for exasperation? Forget about him and fix your mess. I'm just saying, if we should... Okay, no, the next one's long. Alright. Whew. 2 chapters. 11 and 12. I don't have any said specific thoughts about these 2 chapters specifically. Still, they're not growing on me. Like, Julian's not growing on me, Hallie's not growing on me. I feel like they're forcing the characters a little too much on me, and they're not really growing on me, and they're not really feeling relatable. The only one that I find slightly, like, I vibe with her is Natalie right now, which is, like, I don't know. But anyways, chapter 11 and 12 for you. I will be doing another video possibly this weekend if I have time. Big on that if I have time. Yeah. So, I also had to get AAA batteries, guys, so I can put lights in my fairy lanterns. Okay. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Sorry that my throat wants to give out every time I decide to read these. I can talk for hours, but all of a sudden I try to read these chapters by myself to you guys, and my throat is like, we're done. Like, it gets raspy and it hurts. Like, you can just pick and choose when you decide to work, queen. Anyways, bye, my lovelies. Love you. Miss you.